that this combination of AI and personalized or precision medicine, like it feels like we are entering into this new era of medicine.
There are exciting possibilities. Everybody needs to kind of put their heads together and say, okay, what are we going to do? How are we going to handle this?
At the end of the day, I would love for us to create a system where the decisions that we're making and the policies that we're passing consistently move us towards the society that we want to be. There are so many influences over health decisions and health outcomes that even just focusing on healthcare is insufficient to give us peak performance in health.
All right, Erin Keyes, welcome to the show. It's so great to have you here, my friend. And wow, all the way up from Los Angeles. What a long trip to San Francisco.
Thank you for having me. It's been a journey to get here, and the drive and the exploration. As I was telling Zach, we've done a tour of San Francisco. My daughter is extremely excited to go to the Ferris wheel, which she calls the merry-go-round. And we took both our 100-pound dogs and child on the Ferris wheel in advance of this. So, podcast isn't a big deal. That was way more stressful.
Wow, 100-pound dogs on the Ferris wheel. That's quite a sight.
I'm kicking myself a little bit for not buying the touristy photo of it because that would be hilarious, but I probably still could.
You know what? I have one from Niagara Falls that just never gets used anyway. So, it's sort of the same thing, right?
Do it for the memories.
Yeah. Yeah. It's, it's funny. You can keep them in here just as well as you keep. It's like, yeah. Anyway. So great to have you here and lots of stuff to talk about. And so let's start off with your charity. Let's talk about it.
Yeah.
Tell the audience what it's all about.
We're going to do Breakthrough T1D, which supports type 1 diabetes, research, programmatic development, advocacy, and really trying to improve the lives of type 1 diabetics across the nation and the globe.
So many people just don't know. They don't understand the huge difference between type 1 diabetes and type 2 diabetes, pre-diabetes. So maybe let's just start there for a moment and go through that if we could.
Yeah.
You know it better than anybody.
Yeah. So I have type 1 diabetes. Type 1 diabetes generally is an issue with producing insulin. So an issue with the pancreas and the beta cells in producing insulin, which are a key metabolic resource for the utilization of glucose in the body. Type 2 diabetes and prediabetes tends to be more along the lines of insulin resistance. So your body is oversensitized or desensitized, overproducing insulin and doesn't use it as efficiently. What's really interesting is we're seeing other types of diabetes as well. So with the food system and the calorie-dense, nutrient-poor food choices that we have, we're seeing kind of this emergence of other types of diabetes too, or a combination of lack of insulin production and insulin resistance, which has become very complicated to manage. And we talk about my story. We can talk a little bit about insulin sensitivity too.
Is this like some form of metabolic syndrome in some way, shape, or form? Is there an offshoot of that, or what tell us about that?
Yeah.
It's interesting.
So I think, when people talk about your metabolism, there's so many things that go into a metabolism, one of which is related to insulin and the utilization and usage of insulin in the body. For prediabetes, that is a degree arbitrary classification of your hemoglobin A1C and your running blood glucose levels. And so when you get slightly elevated, people call it prediabetes. And then when that is increasingly elevated, that's when it moves into a type 2 diabetes category. But at the end of the day, what we want is for your general blood glucose to be on the lower side, less than 100. Ongoing as a type 2 or pre-diabetic. So moving people more towards better insulin sensitivity and improved glucose management. For type 1 diabetes, it's kind of this complicated endeavor, right? Because we don't produce insulin, and so it's all self-ejected. And with that comes risks of both high glucose and also low glucose. And there's a perfect balance of how much insulin you have, how much glucose you have circulating in the blood and the muscles, et cetera. And so finding that fine-tuned line is a bit of a challenge. And there's so many factors that go into it. that's really, I think, where we can help individuals explore how to better control their glucose regulation and utilization and give type 1 diabetics better tools to monitor and work with the body to better manage those levels.
Okay. You are an epidemiologist. So
Yeah.
I do want to ask you how many, because I want to make sure my facts and data, it's correct. So long story short, how many diabetics are there in the United States?
I actually have no idea, but it's a ton. I think it's something, if we combine type 1, type 2, prediabetes, et cetera, it's something like 40%, I think.
Yeah, my number I thought it was 30%.
Yeah.
But I guess when you add in the pre-diabetics, goes much higher.
Perhaps even higher than that, actually.
Yeah.
But it's a significant portion of the population. And then even outside that classification, to your point, there are examples of insulin resistance, metabolic insufficiency. There's many degrees of metabolic management that we can improve or we can focus on to improve how the body really regulates itself. But the metabolism is really complicated. So this is just kind of one variable within that.
So while we're on diabetes and talking about it, when you think about it, are there points in time when somebody who is a type 2 diabetic can move to a type 1 diabetic?
So yes, that's a great question. I actually had someone reach out to me recently because I posted something about having my insulin denied by my insurance coverage, kind of data error and how we manage the approval of prescriptions. But someone mentioned that their mom was reclassified from a type 2 to a type 1 diabetic and is having to resubmit coverage to their insurance very frequently because of the level, when you get better control, decreasing hemoglobin A1C below the classification of a type 2 diabetes category, no longer covering insulin. So yes, I suppose it can happen. Type 1 diabetes tends to be an autoimmune disease, so something where you have a dysregulated immune system. The immune system attacks the beta cells within the pancreas and reduces their ability to produce insulin effectively or at sufficient quantity. Type 2 diabetes, you still have the beta cells in general, but you are less sensitive to insulin and the process is less efficient. Is there a world where your immune system could be activated after having type 2 diabetes and then kill off cells? I'm sure. Is there also a world where we kind of effectively lose the ability to produce sufficient insulin that could then be reclassified as type 1 diabetes? Probably, but honestly not my area of expertise.
Yeah. I mean, so do you feel like the type 1 diabetes thing is some sort of genetic lottery that you just get the dubious luxury of working with, or what's?
Good question. I mean, for autoimmune disease as a whole, there can absolutely be genetic components to that. There's also environmental exposure. So one of the things that I'm very interested in from an epidemiological framework is what I like to call the exposome and what is classically called the exposome. So it is sort of this summation of all of the things to which you are exposed and the allostatic load or overload that you receive from that. So that might be everything from your individual genetics through toxin exposure, through stress management, through infectious diseases, et cetera. And so when you overload or overwhelm the body, it can, kind of interrupt the natural healing cycle or maintenance process of the cells themselves and cause risk factors to have something like an autoimmune disease. So stated more simply, when we put an undue amount of stress on the body and the cells, they kind of, get overwhelmed and have a misstep. And that can lead to immune dysfunction, which causes an autoimmune disease because your immune system didn't follow the instructions that it natively has. And that can lead to great consequences.
Oof, serious consequences.
Serious consequences.
Yeah, like life or death consequences, right?
Definitely. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And when do we see like diabetes start to show up where people have wounds, they start to get neuropathy, they step on a Lego and they cut, whatever, and won't heal. Where does hyperbaric oxygen therapy play into that? How does that all work?
Yeah. So in the diabetes process, there can be an evolution of degradation. And so chronic high or elevated blood sugars can, wreak havoc on the body, on circulation, on a whole bunch of foundational elements to maintaining cellular health, particularly in the extremities. And so with continued issue with circulation or aggravation in the body itself from the sharp glucose in the blood, you can, really effectively destroy your tissues and circulatory systems. So that tends to be with chronic elevated blood sugars and mismanagement. But, I say that in, kind of my historical teachings, which frankly, I feel like has been historically a fairly judgmental discussion around how diabetics manage their care, and thinking about from a systemic lens all the ways that we can help support someone to protect themselves better. This is everything from access to insulin, through to education, through to taking a look at our food system, through to creating a walkable environment that someone feels safe to move their body and activate those large muscle groups to improve insulin sensitivity. There's just so many ways our lived environment is stacked against maintaining a healthy metabolism that we're evolving in a way that we have to now compensate for things that we've done over the last decades to evolve. There are consequences to the ways we've evolved our society. And I think diabetes is an example of a group that's really suffered from some of those larger scale developments.
Yeah, I mean, I think also it's pretty clear that with this, you talked about food. We have food scientists that are figuring out how to get the right amount of sugar, the right amount of fat, the right amount of salt in something to make it hyper palatable, ultra processed, digests quickly, high glycemic, hits the blood sugar, gives you a dopamine spike. And
Totally.
oh, I love this.
Yeah.
Right? I want more.
How lovable is it? It's
Right?
so good. Oh, how do you resist that?
Like, seriously, put a little MSG in the mix and it's like, hey, I'll have the ramen and the ice cream. Thank you. Yeah,
After the podcast, we'll go do that.
we'll do that. We'll eat the ice cream first, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Life's short. Dessert first.
Why not? I've seen you do that, by the way. So
Hey, you know this about me, though. If I love food, I think food is the epicenter of a home, of a culture, of a relationship to self. We're here for a short time. Let's enjoy the very natural, delicious parts of life. And if I'm going to make that choice, I'm going to try and make it the best choice that I can have. So this I think was the example that we've talked about too. Oh, I'll have a cookie, but I want it to be the best cookie so that I can enjoy a bit of that cookie and be like, ooh, that was great. Not 12 Oreos, unless it's from Chinatown in San Francisco and I got to try a new flavor. I'm like, okay, yes, Oreo.
Well, wait a minute. What was the flavor in Chinatown?
Matcha.
Matcha.
Yeah, it's good.
Wow, matcha Oreos? Have not heard that.
Yeah,
That's interesting.
I liked it.
Packed full of great seed oils and all sorts of stuff.
Palatable.
No one knew that Oreos were vegan, right?
That is hilarious to me. Like when you can process something to the degree that they are vegan, like what are we doing?
That's so funny, right? I mean, it's just absolutely hilarious.
I mean, comedy of errors when you think about the food system.
Totally. I mean, yeah. Gosh, I mean, I could go on and on about that.
You and me both.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the interesting thing about you, your origin story, which is kind of where we start the show always.
Yeah.
It's kind of like going back to where you're from. What's how did you get to this place, where you're MPH. So for those that don't know, Master of Public Health, which is not an easy degree to get. Depending on the program, I'm sure.
Not an easy field to work in right now, even.
No, I would have bet it isn't. And then putting an MBA on top of that, which I think is a very interesting combination that intersects the sort of ability to look at the greater good of health of a population, and be a true epidemiologist. You get that chance to see that, and then also take a look at it from a business standpoint. That's a rare sort of intersection. So I'd love to hear, hey, how did it all start? Where'd you go? What'd you do? How'd you get there?
Yeah. So I'm from Detroit, Michigan, which is a wonderful group of people, in my opinion. When you talk about like all quarters of the US and the globe, I love a good Midwesterner. And usually I'll meet someone and then find out they're from Michigan and be like, oh, no wonder I liked you. There's like an authenticity there that I think is really beautiful. So just wanted to shout that out.
Yeah.
Grew up there, went to Michigan. I studied molecular biology and had always a very kind of fundamental interest in the body. Maybe that was a result of the type 1 diabetes, but I think in many ways it's also a result of how my brain works of, you know, to make that higher level decision, I think we have to have a deep understanding of the inputs that create the decision, let alone the outcomes. And so I always had this kind of like, let's take that one level deeper type of approach to problem solving, like even as a kid. So I was diagnosed with diabetes when I was in elementary school. That was terrifying for my parents. My dad's best friend died from diabetes, type 1 diabetes. And that, there's a combination there, right? Like we can victim shame about it, or we can talk about how the system really does fail type 1 diabetics repeatedly. There's a great comedian who talks about how diabetes is one of the very rare states where doctors like, you know what? Here's this medication. It might kill you. It might save your life, but like you go decide based on vibes alone how you use this medication. Good luck. I'll talk to you in 3 to 6 months.
Whoa.
So doing that as a small child, I think, also triggered some curiosity for me about two things. One, what are the systems that we can set up to really help protect the decisions that people make in their own best interest? That double click on the risk factors so that we can protect against those and then help them to optimize the decisions that they're making. But two, the importance of personalization. And that I think we're moving into a new era. And I'm very excited to talk about that with you, actually, because with this combination of AI and personalized or precision medicine, like it feels like we are entering into this new era of medicine for the first time. Really, people have wanted to do this, but we didn't have the skills to do it. All right, my origin story. So I went to Michigan, studied molecular biology, worked at a cardiophysiology lab there for a while. And that, I think, really supported my understanding of cellular function and kind of giving me this framework of scientific thought, scientific methodology, but also sort of this hope and this vision that we can improve the state of humanity, that the hard work that people do, this intelligent, in many ways selfless work, can alter how a population exists in this world, how we're able to enjoy our lives. I didn't love working in a basement with no human contact. So I wound up going back to school. I was deciding between a PhD and a master's of public health. I'd also studied Spanish in school and had kind of this aspiration of improving access to care across populations, globally and locally. So I went to Emory for a master's of public health. I really enjoyed that, some of the best years of my life. I think from a personal perspective, it really shifted how I've approached everything I've done subsequently. And so really giving a deeper understanding of human behavior, everything from education through to implementation and where we get in our own way. So did that, worked globally for a bit, graduated, worked at Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, worked on global migration and quarantine. A lot of it was in the infectious disease realm, which was really cool. Worked on things like bioterrorism and the downregulation of human body function, which was really the first time I kind of understood this world of cellular medicine. Of course, that's in a destructive landscape. But, if we can downregulate function, we can sure as hell upregulate it, right? And so that's ultimately kind of this conclusion that brought me to peptides. I went and worked for Deloitte. Deloitte has an incredible federal government program, particularly federal health, in my opinion, but I'm biased. Worked across a number of agencies, worked on global health security, worked on a whole number of commercial and federal projects, which was a great exposure for me of some of the ways that our regulation influences the processes of our healthcare system and our stakeholders within it, but also what the constraints are at an individual level of who's making decisions to take care of the patient in front of them. And so it gave me this really kind of intersectional understanding of all of the ways that our healthcare decision-making is influenced from a federal down to an individual discussion point. After that, I was very curious about the entrepreneurial nature. I got an MBA while I was at Deloitte. And there seemed like this really good opportunity for me to look at innovation. And I think a lot of innovation is doing something that we're doing in another field in a novel place or in a new context. And so to your point about the kind of rare combination of an MPH and an MBA, I hope that that becomes more popular, because how do we create sustainable programs that have the best investment for ROI, whether that ROI is in context of human lives, money, resourcing, et cetera? How do we actually make our healthcare system more efficient and more performance-oriented? So going back to why the MPH and the MBA is a unique combination that I hope is more common in the future, or having collaborative team members, having both of those perspectives, I think, allows us to think about frameworks where healthcare can be more performance-based and more effective in delivering ultimate care. So we can understand how ROI, whether that's measured in daily adjusted life years, the benefits of life, the human lives, or dollars or resources, how we effectively allocate the ingredients of high-performing healthcare system to manage a program. So after consulting and understanding this opportunity in entrepreneurship and innovation, I jumped into startups. I worked in traditional healthcare. It was before COVID, and so telehealth wasn't really a thing, but I had huge aspiration for that, going back to access to care. So I wound up working for an extremely large urgent care system, joint venture project, with a number of academic healthcare centers in the delivery of effective ambulatory care, on-demand care. In that, we launched a virtual care arm that really exploded during COVID with the need for virtual care for a number of really good reasons. And that itself kind of propelled what I work on forward. It created an opportunity with the reimbursement market and the interest of consumers to deliver a technology-forward solution for their healthcare that kind of restored some of the beauty of like an at-home visit. When someone doesn't feel good, making them come into a hospital system is really hard. And oftentimes the best healing we have can be at home. And so creating systems that can alleviate some of the tension across the healthcare system, allow for improved staffing, improved comfort of patients, reduced infectivity. There's a lot of benefits of that. Once we had the framework of technology, and there were a number of startups that I worked with or for that were interested in utilization of digital delivery, but also data sets, actually, like fundamentally looking at healthcare data in an individual lens and an aggregate format to best predict outcomes. It kind of like opened the doors for utilization of emerging technologies, emerging molecules, et cetera. So that's when I really got into peptides. Insulin is a peptide, so I'm like the longest running peptide user for a lot of people. So insulin was the first commercial peptide. There are a number of other peptides. I think you've talked about it in the show, but it's like a brief refresher. All a peptide is a short chain of amino acids. It's somewhat arbitrary in the length of them. It's like, KPV has 3 amino acids, and other peptides, they cut off at 40 or whatever before moving into a biologic. So it's, basically it's an endogenous molecule that we can use exogenously.
And for the uninitiated, since a lot of people who are listening go, what does that mean?
Yeah. Our body produces these molecules,
right,
and we synthesize them for consumption in the body to improve certain processes.
rather than
Yeah. So peptides are signaling molecules that help direct kind of this orchestra of function within the body. I have huge interest in this because I think it's really sort of the cellular medicine framework is the first time I've seen an actionable framework for prevention. So even when we were talking about prevention, primary prevention, secondary prevention, like preventing diabetes, we're preventing a disease versus how do we actually optimize for overarching prevention and better health for the time that we have. It might extend our lives, but it's definitely going to make the years we have better. And that concept of an actionable framework for general prevention and optimization, this feels like kind of the first time we can have a true structure to support that. It's really cool to me.
It's a turning point.
Yeah.
We look at the traditional sick care model of healthcare, and I think those days, ooh, man, I don't know, all I know is I would not want to be the CEO of any health insurance company. That'd be a tough one to put my head on the pillow every night, taking big bonuses while rationing care for people who really need it.
Yeah.
I think at the end of the day, it's a interesting time and one where there are exciting possibilities. Everybody needs to kind of put their heads together and say, okay, what are we going to do? How are we going to handle this? I'm hoping that someone in Washington, D.C.
calls me, and then we design a personalized program to support the evolution of endogenous molecules.
Well, I think you had a conversation there before, so it might be possible that at this point in time, we can move things forward. Certainly, some great things have happened, right? Getting dyes out of foods and stuff. So
going back to the exposome, I think reducing exposure of things that create distress in the body at a high level is a wonderful pursuit. And I think there's a lot of ways we can villainize how we prioritize reducing the distress of an exposome. But at the end of the day, I've settled on this framework of, is it moving us closer to the society that we want to be, or is it moving us away from the society that we want to be? And if it's moving us closer, I'll support you in it. And let's advocate for the priorities that we have that we think can move us there either at better velocity or in a more ROI-based, performance-based setting. But at the end of the day, I would love for us to create a system where the decisions that we're making and the policies that we're passing consistently move us towards the society that we want to be. I think there's some confusion, though, around what do we want to be as a society, because unfortunately, healthcare isn't just healthcare. Like we were talking about with built environment, it is also our economic structures. It's our development, built environment, design of cities. It is, my husband's an urban planner, and he does more public health than I do at this point. There are so many influences over health decisions and health outcomes that even just focusing on healthcare is insufficient to give us peak performance and health.
That's a really interesting point, because you could be doing all these things. I mean, there's so many factors go into it. You talk about urban planning or city planning or whatever, whatever the planning is. It's like
the regional planning, the differences between someone trying to consume healthcare in rural Arkansas versus Los Angeles County. It's a really different math. And that's why I love telehealth.
Yeah. Yeah. It was interesting, early in my career, doing work in all over the country, but also down in Watts.
Yeah.
And seeing like, wow, like it's really tough for a lot of people to, when you say Arkansas, it kind of makes me think of like, you could be really close to something and not be able to get it. And you could be really far away from something and not be able to get it.
Totally.
And
I think that's a really, really interesting point of what are the characteristics that prevent someone in Watts in Los Angeles from accessing care in the systems that we have created for someone that, has to drive in the Mississippi Delta, that has to drive a really long time for emergency care. There are so many things that are preventable or salvageable, but when you don't have access to that care, it sort of doesn't matter if it is able to be solved if you have no one to solve it. And the dearth of support in healthcare right now, I think, is creating generational issues for families.
Let's talk more about that. What are the effects of this from a family standpoint? I want to go back to, when you first had that diagnosis, did it comprehend to you? I mean, obviously, back then, you're not that old. So back then, yeah, well, you're not. So the reality is, it's not like, I just don't really know enough about what does it mean to have an insulin pump. I remember.
Well, I didn't have a pump at the start. It was straight up injections.
Just injections.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So,
Yeah.
I mean, that for an elementary school kid, I guess, I don't know what the gauge of the needle is 27 or so like that, or what?
31.
31, small.
It's pretty teeny.
Yeah.
Honestly, you don't really feel the injections. And it's the same for peptides as a whole. It's the idea of it is way worse than the experience of it in injection. The risk tends to be in proper dosing for insulin in particular, because, I don't even know if I knew my multiplication tables yet. I don't know if I knew how to add at that point.
You were really young.
But I had to. Or maybe I was just not that bright. And
yeah. The brightness just sort of was a sudden onset thing. You know what I mean? Like, who knew?
That's a story for another
Just
time.
one day, she just all of a sudden was super smart.
Oh, confidence.
Yeah.
It's a big piece of that. But, the error of 2 units when you weigh 70 pounds is a big difference. And at diagnosis, you have something called a honeymoon period where you still have some activation of cells. And so the management of it is scary. The bigger part of it was going through puberty.
Oh, yeah.
And so when you think about this concept of the human body and all of the complexities that it has, throw in a variable like going through puberty or menopause for women or andropause, going through a period of high stress. All of these things have impact on cellular function, organ system function, the body as a whole. I was talking last night, I'm going to butcher this quote, but Phil Jackson said something about how, the strength of a team is the individual members and the strength of an individual member is the team. And that applied so strongly to me on the human body, where we talk about biological age and how each organ system can set our biological age. If you have a highly degraded reproductive system, that's such a biological age. But for those to have peak performance, your body can then improve its performance. But if those aren't matched, if you're not treating this from a whole body perspective and an individual system perspective, you're going to have issues. So it's like a massive control room.
Yeah, pretty wild. There's so many points along the way in that, and I think that it's really, really interesting. I mean, for a kid, was that traumatic in some way, shape, or form?
Totally.
Yeah.
I think it was sort of the first time I ever understood how to abandon myself.
What does that mean?
There are sort of, there's probably more than 2 options, but for me, there was always kind of 2 options on how one handles stress. You move through it regardless of costs. And that tends to be, I think of myself as we talked about this, like the tier 1 operator framework of no, we're getting to that destination. I don't care how many things we have to drop. I don't care how many bruises I have. I'm getting there.
Well, how many tourniquets have you?
We're going to arrive. The wheels are going to be falling off, but we're going to get there. Or maybe the wheels aren't going to be falling off. That'd be the ideal scenario, but we're going to get there. Or, there's this concept of oh, I can, sit with this and understand what my next step is and be a little bit softer and gentler in arriving at that next step. And so for me, type 1 diabetes had an association of severe discomfort. Whether my blood sugar is high or low, there's discomfort there. Injections themselves aren't particularly fun. My skin was really sensitive, is to some degree still sensitive, which we have to talk about my face for. And managing, once I got in the pump, the glue for it or bleeding back out through the cannula, it's a lot of difficulties to manage. And so I have a high association with pain. And I think that influences how I feel my body and experience my body. That's one thing that I will advocate for being very important in a healthcare conversation is a patient's connection to self and body experience. So if I'm having a conversation in a clinical setting with someone and they're telling me how they feel in their body, well, I believe them because they're the only ones that know what it's like to experience living in their body, and that's different for everyone. So I think it was the first time that I sort of made this active decision of, no, I'm going to pursue progress over understanding exactly how I'm feeling right now. And I started to abandon my respect for my own body and my ability to comfortably ask for help on things that I thought made me different.
Wow.
Yeah.
That is intense.
Well, it's taken me 30 something years to figure that out, but
Yeah. Yeah, but I mean, that is intense. I mean, I'll have to go back and listen to that. Like, being one of the kids is not the bright one. It's gonna take me a long time. I'm gonna have to go back and like listen to that 5 times, and like then I'll finally get it. Um, yeah, that's wild. That is a wild.
but I always like to, was it sandwich method? The good thing, the hard thing, the good thing. We'll do a half sandwich here. The good thing is over time, I think it has given me somewhat of an ability to be a bit more authentic in my interactions. So I will likely in my lifetime always have something. And that gives me this ability to bond and hear and experience the difficulties other people are going through. And like you said, there's like really nothing that's too small to feel concerned for, like giving people the space and the container to experience the life that they're living. I have a more fine-tuned version of that. And secondarily, as I've gotten better about prioritizing what really does make a difference for me, so like we've talked about on the phone with how do you major in the majors and not major in the minors, it's really important that I learn to have sensitivity to the experiences that I have with type 1 diabetes, because you could throw all the peptides and supplements at me, but if my diabetes is not well managed, those are going to be a tiny influence on my overarching health journey.
Yeah.
And I have to prioritize that. And that's taken fold in, how do I not abandon myself and reduce stress in my life, or give myself the ability to cook my own food, which I love so much. And so how does it inform these big decisions I make in my life so that I have the container to best take care of myself? So I think it's sort of opened me up to the understanding of the systems and individual behaviors and removing some of that judgment that a lot of people experience in a healthcare setting and advocating for patients or friends or family members or whomever in the healthcare space too.
Yeah, gosh, it's so crazy, isn't it? When you understand what your baseline is and what you're dealing with, oftentimes through labs and however you're going to get there with the right provider, the right friends, will have the right information. If you're plugged into healthcare, I always think for a lot of people, man, it's like, it's so hard for them to understand any of this stuff.
Totally.
But I think the positives are that once you really have that understanding and okay, what am I dealing with? What am I working on? And, then, reframing after, a period of time, getting that down is, gosh, it's so incredible. Right. And now I'm in a place personally. You said like, cooking at home. I really struggle to eat out. Like we were having a post-workout meal. And so it was a Thai food.
Love Thai food.
I love Thai food, but you know what? It's like I used to eat sticky rice. No. Don't want that because it's wrapped in plastic, not a banana leaf. And so there's plenty of BPA right there in that rice.
I had a BPA with my sticky rice.
Yeah, exactly. And I was like, I felt like Anthony Bourdain. I'm like, this Thai papaya salad has it had iceberg lettuce. And I'm like, like you can literally taste the DDT on it. It's like, it's just so bad. It's in everything. I guess there's a ton of DDT in all of our bodies. But anyway, long story short.
Yeah, we have like a plastic spoon worth of microplastics in our brain.
Yeah, that's a really great way to picture it, right? Hopefully it's just right straight down the middle.
Sometimes I'm like, oh, that's where my spoon is today. Got it.
I think about all the bottled water that I've had out of, over the years.
Ooh, did you feed your children with the plastic liner in the bottles? It's a generation of us.
You know what? So I don't think my wife ever gave a bottle to a kid.
Wow. That sets them up for success.
Yeah. I mean, I think she was really, really all, about doing it the right way.
So they maybe have like 3/4 of a spoon then.
Yeah. Let's hope it's just a quarter and they're on their way to the 3/4, but, who knows? Who knows? Yeah, it's a crazy world out there, especially with the supplementation stuff that, I have a son who's an athlete, obviously, and he, some of the supplements that are just totally unregulated, we don't even know what they are half the time, the stuff that comes in supposedly, and I'm not making any assertions here because
No claims.
no claims.
Medical.
Yeah, it's not medical advice and I have no idea. But, I heard the other day that half of the supply chain in Amazon is full of fake stuff.
Right.
Right. So it's like not even, so you'd think you're ordering pure encapsulations arginine,
Mm-hmm.
and it's not even that. It's just might as well be chalk or whatever it is that they put in. I'm sure it's not chalk, but it's kind of scary, right? It's
Totally.
like, especially when you're in a situation where you need that particular supplement as directed by a healthcare provider for a very specific thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Pretty scary.
Totally.
So let's talk about like insulin availability, price. I mean, it's at times it's gotten really expensive, and it's also not. I mean, there's some thought that access to can be difficult. So, what's your outlook there?
What is my outlook? It's funny because what I'm realizing in this conversation is how little I have interrogated type 1 diabetes, because I think it is really difficult to actually take an honest look at your own mortality.
Yeah.
There have been big decisions in my life that I have said yes to or said no to with the framework of diabetes in my mind. But it's little things where I do remember, this is me in a nutshell, just a little fun side story. My husband and I decided to get married on a Friday over pizza, and then got married on Monday morning at the courthouse in Atlanta, Fulton County. And as part of the grand romantic conversation, which to a type 1 diabetic is so romantic, a lot of it was about health insurance coverage. Now that is a rose.
Yeah.
And so the first time I refilled my diabetes paraphernalia with his insurance, I called him and I was like very emotional. I was like, it's $150. And he's like, oh no. I'm like, oh no. I was paying like $2,700 a month.
Wow.
For, all of it. And that is my privilege that I still could do that. I still could go out and find all of these tools that I needed to best manage my health. It is really hard for people that don't have the capital resources to still make that purchase. Did I have sacrifices for it? Of course, but being able to make that decision was a huge difference for me. And so there are many other people who they'll be on injections. They will struggle to purchase glucose strips. They will, there's a whole arsenal of materials that you need to best manage a disease state, and having to make decisions of, do I have my heart disease medication or my insulin this month? How are we still blaming individuals for their management of health when those are the decisions that they're having to make? So I think there's definitely a classist segregation of who has access to good quality care, but also the materials to support that high quality protocol. And those who don't. And I think that's actually a really relevant piece of the conversation around peptides as a whole, which tend to be cash-based practices and high cost. And so those who have access to these tools right now are of higher socioeconomic status. Of course, the vision is to create accessible pathways, and the current administration is also working on that in context of GLP-1s. I hope that extends to other peptides. But in the meantime, it really is a decision of do you have the money to pay for your protocol and do you not? So my outlook is pretty sad when it comes to that realization.
Yeah. Somebody in the Mississippi River Delta, it's already dealing probably with, in many cases, they're going to be dealing with poverty. poverty in and of itself can create PTSD, because if you don't know, right?
You look at the neurochemical development of the brain in context of poverty, and it shifts how we respond to stimuli. It's really interesting.
Yeah, it's very it's stimulating fight or flight in a lot of situations. I mean, that's pretty crazy. And then, hey, can I get access to this? Where do I have to go? And trying to manage that while you don't have transportation and you don't have maybe a steady job.
Housing insecurity.
Yeah, I mean, all of those things.
Access to a refrigerator. I talked to a woman who has a son who has type 1 diabetes, and I remember hanging up the Zoom and bursting into tears because and this is a business conversation. It wasn't like we were talking about diabetes. But it came up that her son had type 1 diabetes and how she basically had this network of individuals that she leveraged to stockpile insulin and materials and supplies so that if something happened to her, something went down with the pharmacy system, or they lost their insurance, all of these use cases, she had, planned for that scenario. And the effort that she took to protect her son from the realities of making that decision was just I felt such connection to her, and that people like that and people that were stockpiling it with her exist in this world. How beautiful that people are so willing to extend themselves for the honor to care for each other. And such deep sadness that was a reality that she clearly thinks about all of the time. And how much work goes into protecting her son from realizing that she's going through that stress too. Oof, what an emotional ride.
Yeah, I mean, and only, since you are a parent, my dad would always say this thing, never, or always, he's still alive, so always says this thing: never trust anybody that doesn't have a little drool on their shoulder. And in other words, hey, if you're not a parent, you just can't know. It's like talking to anybody that does something that you just can't know. You talk to somebody who's a combat veteran, other people just can't understand what it's like to be a combat veteran.
Totally.
So the reality is oh my gosh, to think about how much you love your kids. I'm always, it's interesting, I'm always amazed and shocked by the people that don't
have kids,
that don't love and care for their children.
Ugh.
I mean, it just
trauma, probably.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's just a pay it forward type of thing, right? Or whatever they do. I mean, I don't know. I didn't grow up in a situation where I had anything like that, but it's just hard. It's hard to imagine. But I mean, back to the lady, right? You just think about that as a parent and how the desperation that someone can feel to take care of their child. No one can understand that until they've really been a parent. Your kids, I talk to my kids, I'm we'll get into something. I'm gonna be like, this is a pointless conversation. You're not gonna understand this. I didn't understand it. You won't understand it until you get to that place.
Until you understand it.
Yeah. And then when you understand it, you'll come back and
that's actually been the more vulnerable part, in talking about my journey with diabetes, is since becoming a mom and, having a life to care for that's not my own, and the importance of my survival. That's been a really humbling, very emotional experience for me because it's terrifying, and to some degree, as a type 1 diabetic, every day you confront your mortality. And so if I have a pump malfunction and I get too much insulin, or I make a mistake, or I sit on my phone and it doses me incorrectly and I die, I just die. And, hopefully there's someone there to prevent that. But that's been really scary for me because it does feel just beyond my control. And that's panic-inducing. My daughter's still young too, and so, I think her understanding my disease process has been scary for her. And yeah, there's a lot of emotions that go into confronting your mortality when you have that desperate love as well. So I have great empathy for parents of type 1 diabetic children. I have huge empathy for parents who have type 1 diabetes, or any disease for all of this, pediatric cancer, any risk factor, housing insufficiency, like all of these things, I have huge empathy because doing your best in the context that you exist is just that's a really big part of being human.
Yeah. And stuff that we often just don't think about.
Yeah. How could you?
Hey, it's like nobody really wants to, right? Hey, we just want to go on with our lives the way that, it's all supposed to go until it doesn't.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's pretty crazy. Let's talk about wellness washing.
Yeah. I think this is something, obviously one of my fixations here is from the origin story, right? Of how do we best understand the priority pathway to improve an individual's health, but a population health. And so with that, that's why I have such a fixation on creating a universal database or data set for emerging molecules so that we can get them to market faster and more safely, more efficiently, effectively, and improve health outcomes that way. If we don't have measurement, it's very difficult to navigate an environment of wellness with mixed messaging. And, the person on the left says yes, the person on the right says no. Tomorrow, we like protein, now we like fiber. It's just do high intensity exercise. No, actually just walk and, maybe strength train twice a week. Like there's just so much mixed messaging. And perhaps all of those messages are true, but they depend on the individual. Or perhaps none of those messages are true, but without data and without an understanding of the biology, the chemistry, and the physics of the body for that individual function in that moment, we really can't make good decisions about this. And so what does bother me is kind of this wellness washing, which I just made up right now, but is probably a term.
No. We're giving attribution to Erin Keyes, wellness washing established right here, right now.
I mean, it's kind of like greenwashing with environmental friendliness, where, it's someone will take out some negative ingredient and then that becomes a health food. And we could talk about this in context, actually, of a lot of the things with the dyes. Like we said, is it moving us closer to the society we want to be? Yeah. Is it having the same degree of impact as not consuming Doritos at all? No. But, that's the reality of being human is to some degree, you don't, you got to go out and live your life. We all die in the end. What is the joy that you're getting in it? And how do we help people foster the best decisions for them? So it's really confusing trying to make that decision and allow for freedom and liberty, but also guidance and protection of a population. These things are at odds. And where you sit and where you prioritize is going to be different depending on your state of life, your context, your mood that day.
Yeah.
There's a lot to think about. It is a very hard job.
It really is. It's funny because, the Doritos piece, I never really think about, and I never eat Doritos.
Me neither. But now they sound good.
But I do love Kraft macaroni and cheese. That's pretty bad.
Yeah.
To admit that.
Is Annie's better?
What?
Is Annie's better?
Yeah. I don't think so.
Right.
Right. I mean, at the end of the day, for me, eating any kind of anything like that, it's going to produce a really negative effect for me in terms of inflammation in my body.
Yeah. Yeah. We talk about how there are consequences of every action and there are consequences of inaction. And so I think that's something that I really wrestle with in context of the patient population and program design. I will often work with practitioners to put together programs for them, peptides, wellness, emerging technologies, trials, whatever it might be, as well as work with patients to understand the experience that they're having.
The interesting thing, we talked a little bit about peptides and where that's all headed and sort of the accessibility of peptides today. And where do you see that eventually going? I mean, because the goal is that you hope that everybody has access to that, and we can create a healthier, more stable population. It's so much, I mean, like, let's face it, it's so much better for the country
Mhm.
in every way, shape, or form that everybody is healthy as they possibly can be. I think we have some systems that are
Yeah, it's very broken.
very. Um, but so where do you see, as someone who's been so close to the whole peptide world, where do you see it going?
Mm.
I mean, like,
I
what's
mean,
the trip?
exploding.
Just
Yeah.
right. I mean, rockets taking off right now.
Mhm. And I think what's really interesting is there's so many more peptides in the pipeline that we don't even have awareness of. And so there will be complexity in how we get these molecules to market in a safe and effective way. But in my phone book, there's a number of people who have access to through biotechs, through inheritance, through development in their labs, novel molecules that, by the sound of it, could really be paradigm shifting. And now we just have to figure out how to safely get that to people. This isn't necessarily dissimilar from a lot of other ways we've brought new things to market. So I work with different groups, right? I work with vendors and suppliers bringing their work to market. I work with clinicians in delivering this care, setting up their compliance or business strategies, doing protocol development based on data, identifying proper sourcing, keeping them safe, um, and kind of everyone in between, building tools to support these processes. And so what I find, kind of most intriguing about this future explosion that we're going to see, both with the utilization of existing molecules, that there's some, kind of anecdotal data right now in human form, and a good amount of animal data for some of the molecules and others not so much, is how to protect the practitioner. Because what I find really courageous and uplifting about working with this group of clinicians and care deliverers is that they have the courage and the creativity and the focus to really best deliver next generation care to the audiences that need it. And that there's a risk in that. We mitigate risk at all costs, but there's still a risk to it. I don't want to put them in a position where they lose their license or they are pulled from delivering care at all, because those are the individuals that are changing lives on a daily basis. And the cost of removing them from care is way bigger than the cost of losing a molecule.
Yeah, it's crazy. When I think about, like, the potential trajectory of your career, knowing you, um, I'm surprised at, like, all healthcare eventually gets lines up in some sort of roll up, right? It's like you're the ideal candidate for some private equity to come along and say, okay, tell us where we should be focused on, and how do you make sure that those investments then actuate, because it seems like we are in the beginnings of something that is, you know,
I like that concept, though, because this is something else that I think is sort of an issue within the market, is that we have a ton of point solutions that people have to DIY together. So if you want support with musculoskeletal, you go here. If you want support with general optimization, you go here. You want metabolic support, you go there. And so there's a lack of integration around solving for your own best health. And so I think, to your point about, kind of collaborating at a higher level to instill programs that include peptides or supplements or other hormones, whatever molecule it may be, to help augment the delivery of care. So if someone's working on electric stimulation for musculoskeletal care, how do we leverage peptides into that to create an environment that best fosters outcomes inclusive of their care? So I think, I would like to be in a space where we can sit at a higher level and understand, okay, if we add this vertical into here, what are the multiplication effects of that? What are the revenue effects of that? What are the costs of care at a, higher level, so that we can augment and bolster the delivery of really high quality interventions and prepare the body to best receive those interventions to really kind of yield success and revenue for all. So I think that is the pathway for how peptides will develop, is they will go from being a standalone pursuit into being integrated into other types of care as a foundational element that bolster the outcomes of other interventions as well.
Well said, Senator Keyes. Holy smokes. Whoa. That is so true.
Yeah.
Can you imagine? I've seen models, and by the way, um, we've had discussions about different types of models over the years. What I would say is, I think there's something coming.
Yeah.
And it's big. It's multimodality. It's, all of those things all in one place, a different type of care delivery. How it gets paid for is the question. And gosh, man, I mean, the potential to really take things to the next. I've learned so much from you and others along the way around really how to optimize. And it's just so exciting.
It is really exciting.
It is exciting. I think it's interesting. If you go back and you think about it, you see these people that are living, to like, I just had a friend that I've known for many years in on the show, and he's 88, going to be 89. And, he's like, people look at him, they go, gosh, I can't believe he's 88 years old. He's in such great shape. You think about it though, like probably in his early days, his diet is totally different.
Mm-hmm.
He's working out, he's doing all these things, football player, all the kind of stuff. We get to this point in time somewhere, I don't know when it is. Is it in the 70s when food starts to really change? Is it somewhere in that way? And then all these other environmental sort of like, who knows what's in some of these products that you have just in your house. We're breathing in more and more bad stuff.
EMF.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. Oh, I mean, the EMF thing is crazy. It's wild to think like, now there's talk about, you mentioned AI before, putting data centers in low Earth orbit powered by solar,
Mm-hmm.
which is a great solution where Google wants to take it. I wonder how Elon plays into that, because he's the only one that could probably put that, although that's not true. There are other people that could put it out there and do it. But, I mean, it's like we're heading into a wild time in the sort of, the speed in which, like, take an example, ChatGPT,
Mm-hmm.
right?
My best friend.
It's pretty good. It's pretty good. If you know how to use it, it's pretty good.
Yeah.
As is Gemini and Claude and I love Grok as a model. It's just got to, there's some things about it.
There are pros and cons to each of them. And I think there's a ton of talk about how AI can be utilized in a healthcare environment and what the regulatory impacts about that are. The insurance actually and liability model for AI within healthcare is something really to consider here. And a lot of fear, I would say, about job replacement in a healthcare environment. And I think, I've always been pretty bullish about AI will add value. It is how we allocate our time, effort, utilization that improves the outcome of it. But if you're trying to stay away from AI, it's still going to come. We have to figure out how to best use it in this case. And that's where things like computational biology and drug development, I think, could be revolutionized through use of AI. And like we were talking about before, kind of like my big dream, I just realized all of this time later, I think my big dream would be to work on a project that allows for almost this kind of third category of medication. So we have things that are FDA regulated as drugs, things that are not FDA regulated like supplements and other, categories within that. And I really believe there needs to be this third category, which is endogenous molecules or, as we age and we go through our exposome and we have all of these assaults to the body, how do we replace and optimize levels of things our body already has access to so that we can clarify the language our body already speaks? And that to me has to be a third category that we invest in approval of those uses, aggregate that data, and then foster the development of technology such as a continuous glucose monitor. But instead of monitoring glucose, we're monitoring, testosterone, or we're monitoring ATP or whatever it is. And so that we can improve our dosing strategy and our protocol development to really be personalized to that area. My brother, who's an MD PhD candidate, brought this up to me. He was basically like, yeah, it was a really cool thing that they made insulin for you. Well, not for me, but it's really cool that they made insulin. But the lives of type 1 diabetics really fundamentally shifted when we got access to glucose meters. Because before it was kind of a shot in the dark. And it feels like we're a little bit in that state with peptides right now, where we don't totally know exactly what we're doing with them. Doesn't seem like there's huge risk. Like many people will say you can't really overdose on it, whether or not that's true. You could overuse them, but we could have more specifics to actually yield the positive health outcomes specific to that person and the ecosystem of factors in the body. So that's where I think AI will be extremely critical for the development of the drugs and the utilization of drugs, endogenous molecules.
Yeah, well, first of all, it sounds like you were hanging out with Aubrey de Grey at Oxford in 1998. Like,
I'd love to have done that.
yeah, exciting time, right? And then the notion of that data lake, and I think the problem is of the sharing of information, that you have to have consumer buy-in to actually get to that place where people are actually putting their anonymous information into. And then, there's a question of, is it subjective or objective information? Is it really truly what it is? How do it has to come through some form of testing.
Right.
But if you can get that information.
I still think this is where we do the Bitcoin model, where people have micro ownership over their data.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's interesting. The future is bright. There are so many things that could happen. They could be so powerful for people, and really understanding that, like, at the end of the day, I always go back to, there is no diet that, there is no one size fits all. We're all N of one. So understanding what are the things that you need as an individual, and then having enough data to support that. There's just not, it doesn't exist today.
Right.
There's like, we've talked about pharmacokinetic testing, really. So genetic testing on, like some medication just doesn't work for people.
Or what epigenetic environment can we put them in so that it could work? And I think that's...
Yeah.
Those are the types of questions that I'm really intrigued by too, of, certain molecules don't work if you don't accompany them with specific minerals or vitamins. That can't be the only concept where a medication can work if.
Yeah, it's interesting because, like, every day, I kind of go through my little routine of making sure that I get my amino acids. I have a pretty specific diet, but, I get my amino acids, I get my minerals. I'm making sure that I'm really probably tracking food or in a way that's not like super precise, but I get a general idea of what I've got and need in a day. So, and what I found through, trying lots of different things, like, hey, I'm going to go do this, sort of carnivore thing or keto thing. And there's certain aspects of that that are cool. You want to be metabolically flexible, and you want to be able to enjoy life and do certain things. It's interesting though, recently I've really noticed, holy smokes, as the road has narrowed for me, like if I do something, like the other day I had something, I was like, the first time I had something fried in a long time.
Tell me you don't live in the South without telling me you don't live in the South.
Seriously, I was like, oh my gosh, I feel so crappy. I was like, and it's that getting it down to a place where you can actually recognize it. And I thought to myself, how many years did I eat all this stuff? And I just wasn't recognizing it because I'm just shoveling that stuff in. But you get to a point in time where it's like, no, I just can't do that anymore.
I think you asked a good question earlier, sort of around the timeline of when do these health decisions become more or less important. And I think some people are supportive of thinking about aging as a disease state. Some people are kind of antagonistic to that idea. But the concept of degradation over time, that, you go through these exposures in life, these decisions in life, and things accumulate and errors are made throughout the body. We are imperfect. And so over time, some of the degradation just accumulates. And so the smaller decisions have a greater impact when, your cells are wearing brass knuckles because of the amount of degradation. And so I think that's something that we could talk more about as well, of what got you here is not going to get you there. And so what are the decisions that generally make a larger impact for the characteristics or cohorts that you are participant in? There's some research and some people looking at aggregate data in terms of cohorts for biomarkers. So when you get a lab test, oftentimes we review them by individual biomarker, like what's your, LDL. And there's a movement towards looking at these in kind of longevity cohorts, where if one variable is elevated, but this other variable is also elevated, that person actually belongs to a cohort that lives longer. Whereas if someone has the original high variable, but this other variable is low, that puts them in the danger zone. And so it's this new perspective of, again, the body is an ecosystem. And if we're moving things through with the velocity towards adaptation, we can have a longevity cohort regardless of individual metrics. So I think that's something that we're going to start hearing a lot more about as well.
I could listen to you talk about that for hours. That is really, really interesting.
And I think it's hopeful. That is the one thing that I really do find personally like a very fulfilling aspect of the job. We talked about, the importance of education and empowerment and all of that. And how, I'm never going to know what it's like to be a combat soldier. I think we have this ability as humans to hold a container that allows the person to be authentic with you and share the experiences that they've had with you, and then apply that to the data that we have, so that through a cooperative, co-conspired approach towards someone's goals, we can best, without a judgmental approach, really try and meet the goals that they have. For some people, and I always say, I don't really care why you got into this world. It's why you continue to stay that really matters to me. So you have a lot of people that come in, whether that's GLP-1s for weight loss or aesthetics and anti-aging. And then it's oh, I have fallen in love with myself again, and I want to live the best life that I can. What are all the ways that I can improve my health span, longevity, quality of life, energy, vitality, whatever it is? And so giving people access and exposure to this entire world after their entry point is a really, really cool part of my job.
That is really cool. That notion of you have people who are thirsty, and you've got some water for them.
Yeah.
They're really going for it.
Ugh, what an honor.
Right? I mean, how cool is that? That notion of being able to actually help people to understand something that they don't understand at all.
Or have any exposure to.
Yeah, and the dangers are, I think, now that there's a lot of stuff, you look at YouTube, unregulated.
Totally.
Right? A lot of pseudoscience, a lot of people that don't know. It's why it's really important to be connected to people who really do know.
And have stewardship over making sure that we're updating what we know.
Yeah.
I think that's the piece where, everybody's sort of doing the best with the information that they have, but follow those who are updating the information that they have.
Well, we know some people that are doing that, and they're doing it well, and trying to stay on top of, and working to work with each other to understand on a regular basis, hey, what are we finding out? And sharing that information, which is so powerful.
Huge.
And that's super exciting. Gosh, I've learned so much in that process of being a part of that, and just as an observer, right?
Yeah.
Not as a doctor, I'm not one. So, or a provider of any sort. There's like a ceiling, right? I get to the point, I'm like, oh, what the heck does that mean? I have to ask about it later.
But I think that point actually is a really good one, which is the consumer education piece. And how do we not gatekeep data or access or pipeline or whatever it might be so that someone can help themselves make the decisions and find the guides to make the best decisions for them. So you're giving me some ideas around how to design that support for an individual consumer.
Yeah. Well, then I'm not saying anything at this point. I'm going to let you have your thing. I'm not saying anything more since you've got an idea. Because I had an idea, I was doing something, but I'm not going to.
No, now I got to know.
No, it's, well, I mean, it's just like silly stuff. I mean, having it was a conversation. I like to have the conversations with the models. And I think it's really interesting to think like a lot of the models that we see that are big data, big models, right? So you look at all the big companies. There's also these open source models that are going to be sort of, you could just run these independently. They get the information they need in their own way.
I love that.
For hospital systems and for research organizations, probably in many ways, like the only way that you can do
it. Clinical trials.
Yeah.
How cool would that be for improved adherence and consistency?
Yeah. I mean, it's an incredible opportunity. I think what we're going to see on the AI side of things is so powerful. Of course, there are some jobs they're going to go by the wayside
or be repurposed.
Well, that's the key. See, you just nailed it. In my mind, when we create an agent or a system that does replace human beings in the process of that job, I don't feel so bad. And I'll tell you why. It's because those people can then finally break the chains of that particular position in the healthcare system that ultimately isn't really good for them. And doesn't afford them any opportunity for real growth. And you look at those positions and it's sort of like, hey, I'm stuck in an hourly position. My options are, can I go down the street and make $2 more? There's no future in that for them. And so I think what's really exciting about it is if you can replace some of that with, agents and automation that produces a superior result for a patient. It's all about time. But then also gives those people an opportunity to find another position or up their game inside of a practice, an institution, whatever it is. That's exciting to me.
We'll have to make sure that the education and the opportunity cultivation is in alignment with that. It might be kind of messy in the middle, but
yeah,
that is one of the cool things in terms of access as a whole, this concept that, education has been hidden in ivory towers for many generations. And now we have access to information like never before, and we have access to tools that can foster curricula design, perhaps better or equal to what we've historically experienced. And that is putting pressure on institutions also. So when we think about evolution, we have pressure on individuals, we have pressure on institutions. I will be very intrigued how we meet this opportunity and use it to, kind of the greater good like you're talking about.
Well, there's certainly a lot of opportunities. AI stocks just took a huge hit to the tune of $1 trillion. So, I think it's like the .com days. Like, everybody's like, nobody's going to buy shoes on online. I mean, I could go on and on about, since I was there and I lived it, I was kind of like, the reality of the early e-commerce days.
Yeah.
And,
Well, having that experience, what do you think? Kind of two questions. What are the struggles that adoption of something like AI in a healthcare environment, like what struggles are going to be had? And two, what are the systems or structures or regulation that we need in place to support positive outcomes?
Oof, man, where do you start with that one? The bottom line is first things first, at a foundational level, you have to make sure that these models are, constructed, and you have to put the safety rails on them to make sure that they're doing the right thing. And it depends. I mean, there's so many different areas of healthcare where they exist. So it can be in patient experience, it can be in actual clinical decision making, or supplemental to a doctor. Sort of like the big one now is imaging, right? Taking a look at, hey, can it see something that I can't see? The danger there, I think, is, do we just become reliant on after AI has taken a look at it and didn't say, they didn't see anything wrong, and when we just kind of like, oh, well, they didn't see anything wrong, so I'm just going to move fast because the pressures for healthcare providers so great to just crank it out.
That was actually going to be my example when we were talking about job loss. Was, I think radiology is like and imaging is sort of the story of this, where it actually did not reduce the number of radiologists needed or rad techs or anything like that. It increased the number of images we were able to take and allowed for earlier screening and better detection. And so that's where I think, to your point, can we elevate jobs, but can we also elevate protocols and processes within the healthcare system to alleviate later suffering? And AI must be a part of that conversation.
Yeah, I think one of the areas where you're going to see like massive gains in healthcare, are, and hopefully it's a cost reduction thing, is in automation.
Mm-hmm.
So the ability for a healthcare organization, whatever type it is, to actually move faster, be more efficient, produce better patient experience and outcomes. So, as I've been focused on patient experience for a long time.
Yeah.
And I feel like there's some really exciting things. I think also on the education side of things, that conversation I was having with ChatGPT was like, oh, hey, here's everything that I'm doing right now.
Mm-hmm.
How does this stack up, in terms of what could be missing?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
If we think about some of the stuff that you more than me, but if we think about some of the things that we've been exposed to, I'm at a much lower level than you, but I've seen firsthand things where it's like, whoa, wow, oh, wow, right? It's sort of like, is that really there for them? So you go back to what you talked about before. It's like, oh my gosh, you know what? If patients had that information,
right,
well, they're not entirely dependent on a healthcare provider providing it to them, and it's good information. They still need a healthcare provider to deliver the care.
Yeah.
But
ecosystem approach. I often think about ride-along tools, and I'm working with some companies to develop these that foster better communication between provider and patient, because both of those roles are very stressful and have limitations to them. The provider's limited in what they're able to do, often, whether that's access to certain treatments or administrative restrictions or whatever it might be. The patient is often limited in exposure, in empowerment, in affordability. There's so many limitations. How do we create a bridge so that they can better communicate, prioritize, and sort of envision what that future could look like together? I think there's a lot of opportunity to foster those conversations.
Yeah. And not everybody can just text their doctor,
right?
And just be like at 9:00 at night, or early in the morning, and just ask a question with somebody who's really super high level.
Right.
So that is 1/10 of 1% at best.
Right.
And if that were that couldn't even be the number, right?
Right.
I mean, it's so few and far between.
I mean, triage for emergent scenarios, I think, could be a huge risk there, right? But an aspect of AI that's helpful. That was one of the things we looked at in urgent care, was how do you have some emergency department diversion so that we're not clogging the entry point to the healthcare system and can solve things at a lower level of acuity as is possible. And so perhaps one of the things that we could look at in an AI landscape is extending that tail, where it's not just, is this, pain something for the emergency department or the urgent care center? It is, hey, your Apple Watch is showing me that you might be at risk of AFib in the next 3 days. How do we triage that person so that we have those windows? So I think the effective utilization of data, that will sit with technology, because a physician can't be looking at that. they have way more things to worry about, but that technology can surface that to the provider to best initiate outreach or foster a pathway for that patient to protect. I think that's going to be something. I do think the other part that gives me confidence in a lot of what we're doing is a lot of the patients that I work with. I do some, kind of coaching and individual counseling, advocacy. I'm like a ride-along support tool for a lot of people who are really interested in optimizing their health. They're like incredible leadership within the healthcare environment. And so if those individuals are taking this pathway to optimize their health with these emerging molecules and have all of the science and all of the access and all of the resources available to them, and this is still a really exciting space for them, that tells me that there's really, really something here too. And the majority of our patients, as we were starting this years ago, were scientists. And so to me, that gives great hope that with curiosity and proper education, we can find a really good path forward that brings in, diverse and somewhat undiscovered tools to really take us to the next level.
Super cool. All right. So I want to ask you, when you think about people's health, especially coming from someone who's managing a chronic condition that is life-threatening, it gives you a different perspective. So the average person, talked about this a million times, right? But I mean, it's like, all right, so sleep, exercise, nutrition. I mean, that's going to take those things right there.
Stress management.
Yeah. I was going to say, if you can lower your cortisol in that process, I guess you need to experience some amount of cortisol, to wake up, but, if you, I think if you take care of those things, all-cause mortality goes down so dramatically. But so many people don't find themselves, like we talked about, inability to gain access to. If you're a single mom working 2 jobs with 2 kids that are latchkey kids, you're struggling to put food on the table. When do you work out, right? How do you sleep?
Right.
We could talk about, all these things that are great, but then there's the cold reality that I think everybody's sort of, we have this Pollyanna sort of like, oh, we only do this, you're going to be great.
Yeah.
Then it's not possible for some people, and they don't have access to the right kind of food. They likely won't have access to the right kind of food. They're stuck.
Yeah. And it's not just the single mom with 2 kids. I think other examples that I regularly interact with are, executives that are really in demand and they don't have a ton of autonomy in what their day looks like, fortunately or unfortunately. And it's not that they need to reallocate their time necessarily, that each of us show up for this life and however we show up, and the priority for them may be, for the good of humanity or not, to focus on what they're focused on in their workplace. And food comes secondary to that, or fitness comes secondary to that. And who am I to villainize that decision either? So I don't think it's so much just, you don't have opportunity, therefore the deck is stacked against you. Like, frankly, the deck is just stacked against us. And making those investments into self is a privilege, and it is an honor, and it is a priority for me, but it doesn't necessarily have to be everyone's priority. That doesn't mean that I still can't serve you or benefit you.
Not everybody's going to want to anyway.
Totally.
You know what I mean? It is a choice. Some people are like happy with a little queso, some Bud Light, and a football game.
I do love queso.
Yeah. Not going to villainize you for that.
Thank you.
Hey, I'm your queso.
Because I'm not changing.
Yeah, do your thing, right? The reality is that I think at the end of the day, everybody has to do what's right for them. And the only wish that there are certain people who just don't know and are going to suffer. I mean, I think about, we get back to diabetes, right? And we see this, people having amputations.
Yeah.
Survivability after amputation is not great. And it's really a scary thought that somebody could get into that kind of situation. And I remember the first time I saw that, I was really pretty young. And it was like, wow, this dude's walking around with these weird shoes. Pretty scary.
Yeah.
And then I remember having another friend having, being diagnosed with diabetes and seeing him not really manage it very well.
Yeah, it is challenging, I think, to watch as someone who cares about individuals who are struggling to make decisions, or maybe not struggling with it, just making a decision you wouldn't make. That's really hard. I mean, that's like the messiness of humanity. And I think a lot of it, I know you've had other guests talk about this, and it's been a part of our conversations too, is in life, I think you sort of confirm what you look for. So if you look for the beauty in your life, you'll find it. If you look for the struggles in your life, you'll find it.
So true.
And in context of disease, it can be really challenging to look for the beauty in your life because there's an acute stressor right in front of you. And I'm not someone that has like a Pollyanna view in general. I think life is really, really hard for a lot of people. And there have been moments in my life that are just so hard, I didn't think I could get through them. And then all of a sudden, it's like, oh, the sun feels warm. Or I wake up and I can hear my daughter breathing. And it's like, oh, you know what? The sacred is right in front of me. The divine is right in front of me. And that is what it's all about. And that's it, the whatever gives you that moment of divinity, I think, is where we follow our lives and making sure that that's a real feeling, not chasing dopamine or chasing acceptance or chasing whatever it might be. Is like, how do you discover within yourself the parts of your life that make you a miracle?
Wow, that's a beautiful way of looking at it. I mean, that's profound. I mean, that's for so many people, depending on what it is. I mean, it could be anything. I remember my first knee surgery and like going, oh my gosh, it could just totally throw you off.
Totally.
All the way up to, somebody that has a TBI with PTSD, from that. And don't know when you're going to have a flare,
Mm-hmm.
you know what I mean? And just feel like completely out of control.
Yeah. What's wild about it too, for me, is I feel like, oh, I'm so complicated, like I'm metabolically, my cells are so complicated. There's like millions of just such complexity. So are yours. So is Zach's,
Yeah.
All of us are wildly complex individuals, and all of us will confront those at some point. And that's a really, I think, connecting experience of like, how do you, and moving, I think, a little bit even away from the science side, though there could be a lot of science in this. What are the things we can do for ourselves that best protect ourselves in the context within which we are currently? Is having that close connection to your body and being able to read and interpret and advocate and connect to your body so that the signs that it's telling you, you are able to be a steward towards. And so I think that's something that we've kind of gotten away from, whether that's in making food decisions or when we want to move our body versus not. And there's no real right answer. It's to be in dialogue with what you need mentally, physically, spiritually, and in communion of all of those. So that connection to self, I think we've kind of lost over generations of medicine.
And it's a complex equation.
Totally.
Yeah. Very
It's like a language,
Yeah. I mean, you've got to be able to actually even like, I don't know, like it's like forming words, right? It's like, there's different levels of it and really hard.
Yeah.
All right. Well, listen, my friend, it's been great to have you in.
It's been great to be here.
Yeah. So many things to talk about. It's like, I think we could just go on and on and on. But what I found is that, you try to cut these 3-hour conversations, try to cut them down to something that's reasonable that somebody will actually listen to. Is the big challenge, because there are so many things that we could just continue talking about for hours and hours, which I always love talking to you about. So.
I'm sure we'll do this over time.
Yeah, I would imagine that would be the case. Yep. Just remember the little people as you ascend to greatness, or beyond the greatness that you are today. So
one can dream.
Yeah. Well, hey, listen, it's been a phenomenal time. So thank you.
Back at you.
Hey, thanks everyone for watching the show. Please remember to like, comment, and subscribe. It really helps us out here at the channel, and share the video with someone who might be interested in supporting the charity that our guest mentioned in the episode. Thanks again. We'll see you soon.